Now that's a hungry choir, almost as hungry as a missionary hunting for sin. Oh no, there's nothing to worry about, nothing to have a nightmare over. Say, is there any of that coffee left? Oh, there is. Would you pour me a cup? Oh, well, here. Thank you. Ugh. Nightmares. Say, you get 'em? Nightmares? Me? Oh, I do. You know, I'm never quite sane at night. I can't tell you where they all come from, though. Well, that's not true. I mean, there is this one curious dream I remember. I'm fairly certain where it came from, too. You see, I was out west at the time in a little town. And that day I was walking along the boardwalk and I saw a fella up ahead. Very respectable looking. And he had his back to me and he was looking down at something. Now I couldn't see what it was, so I got curious and I just kind of, wandered my way up there. And as I got closer, I saw it was a long box. And as I got even with him, I saw it was a coffin. The man was an undertaker. And he just pointed down at that body in the coffin. And then he turned to me and smiled. Now that corpse was a brick. Every way you took him, he was a brick. Oh, he was so accommodating and so modest-like and simple in his last moments. His friends wanted a metallic burial case. Oh, nothing else would do. And I couldn't get it for him. There weren't time. They should have seen that. Corpse said, never mind. Just shake him up some kind of box that he could stretch out in comfortable. He weren't particular. Just whitewash his old canoe, Corpse said, and put his address on it and his destination and a verse from some hymn or other and just point him for the tomb. Mark him C.O.D. and just let him flicker. Said he judged where he was going. A body'd find it considerable better to attract attention with moral character than a fancy burial case. Yeah, splendid man he was. I'd rather do for a corpse like that than any I've tackled in 7 years. It's a pleasure to bury a man like that. Makes you feel like you're appreciated. Well, the relations, they wanted a big funeral, but Corpse was set to have things his way, and he had me take down a whole raft of directions, and then he had the minister stand behind a long box with a tablecloth over it, well, to represent the coffin, and he read his funeral sermon, and Corpse said, "Encore, encore," at the good places. And then he made that minister scratch out every bit of brag about him. Then he got him to trot out the choir so he could help them pick out the tunes for the occasion. And he got them to sing, "Pop Goes the Weasel," because he always liked that tune when he was downhearted. And solemn music made him sad. And when they sang that with tears in their eyes, well, because they all loved him and his relations grieving around, he just laid there as happy as a bug and trying to beat time and showing how much he enjoyed it. Oh, and then he got pretty worked up and excited and tried to join in. Oh, well, you see, he was mighty proud of his ability in the singing line. And just as soon as he opened his mouth and tried to join in, his breath left him. I never seen a man snuffed out so sudden. It was a terrible loss, a powerful loss for this little town. Well. You know, I ain't got time to be palavering around here. So I've got a nail on the lid and mosey along with him. Now, if you'll just give me a lift, we'll just skeet him into the hearse and meander along. You know, relations bound to have it their way minute a corpse is gone. But if I had my way, whatever a corpse trusted me to do, I'd do it, you know? Even if it was to stuff him and paint him yeller and keep him as a keepsake. You hear me? Well, that undertaker just went lumbering away, and I just stood there, not quite knowing what to make of my experience. Well, now, I could have told myself that I'd learned a valuable lesson. Well, I mean, I'd seen how a healthy and wholesome cheerfulness is not impossible in any occupation. But I didn't think that. No, later that night I had a singular dream. Now, I was sitting on a doorstep at midnight. No human sound anywhere, not even a footstep. No sound of any kind, except the barking of a dog every now and then. Suddenly, up the street, I hear a bony clacking. And I guessed it was the castanets of a serenading party. Then, a tall skeleton, hooded, wrapped in a tattered, moldy shroud, just strode by me and disappeared into the gloom of night. I knew what that clacking was. His elbows hitting his ribs as he walked. Before I could think another thought, I heard another one. I recognized the clacking. Now this one had 2/3 of a coffin up on his shoulder and a headboard stuffed under his arm. Now I wanted to talk to him, but when he smiled at me with those cavernous sockets, I decided I shouldn't stop him. But he was hardly gone before I heard that clacking again. And out comes out of the shadows another skeleton. This one bending down with a heavy gravestone and dragging a shabby coffin. When he got to me, he stopped and looked at me hard for a moment or two. Then he said, "Will you ease this down, Fred?" Well, I eased that gravestone down and noticed the name John Baxter Copmanhurst with May 1839 as the date of his death. Then that skeleton just wrapped himself in his old shroud and said, "Oh, I almost wish I had never died." And I said, "What's the matter?" "Matter? Look at this shroud. Rags. Look at that gravestone, all battered up. Look at that disgraceful old coffin. All a man's property going to ruin. And you ask, is anything wrong? Well, fire and brimstone! Well, that's too bad. That certainly is too bad. But I didn't think you'd mind too much. I mean, oh, well, considering you're dead. Well, my dear sir, I do mind. I have my pride. I have resided in the old cemetery a block from here for 30 years. I have to tell you, things have changed. Back then, all this was country. Grand old woods, lazy winds gossiping with the leaves, and birds filling the tranquil solitude with music. Oh, everything was pleasant then. I was in a good neighborhood. The only dead people near me belonged to the very best families, and our graves were kept in the very best condition. Oh, it was worth 10 years of a man's life to be dead then. Oh, but that day's gone. I have been forgotten. My grandson lives in a big house built with my money, and I sleep in a neglected grave. And it's not just me, but all my friends. All our graves are caved in, our headboards rotted away, and our monuments leaning. It is a disgrace. Our descendants live off our money, and there isn't a grave that doesn't leak, not one. Every night it rains, we have to climb out and roost in the trees. Our joints rattling and the wind just wheezing through our ribs. Then we come down, chilled clear through. And if you come along just before dawn, you'll catch us bailing out our graves and hanging out our shrouds to dry. Oh, I had an elegant shroud stolen one morning. Think a party named Smith took it. He's in the public cemetery over yonder. Yes, I think so, because the first time I saw him, he only had on a check shirt. And at our last social gathering, he was the best dressed corpse in the company. And it is a significant fact that when he saw me, he left. And an old woman from here was missing something too. Her name's Hotchkiss. Anna Matilda Hotchkiss. Now you might know her. She only has 2 front teeth. Well, are you sure? She's tall, but inclined to stoop. One rib on the left side's missing. She lost it in a fight. And she has a swagger in her gait and a gallus way of going around with her arms akimbo and her nostrils in the air. You might have met her. No? Oh, that's too bad. You would have liked her. Look! There go some of the Jarvises, dragging the family monument along. Oh, we're leaving now. We will not tolerate this treatment anymore. Our descendants mend the city streets, but they won't mend anything that belongs to us. Well, just look at that coffin of mine. In its day, it was a piece of furniture that would have attracted attention in any drawing room in this city. You can have it if you want it. I can't afford to repair it. Well, you put a new bottom on her and part of a new top, and you just put a fresh new lining along the left side and you'll have as comfortable a bed as you ever tried. Oh, hello, Higgins. That's Meredith Higgins, from a very fine family. Died in '44. He is the most disjointed, swaybacked, and distorted old skeleton you ever saw. But he's full of fun. When he laughs, it's like rasping two stones together. And he has this cheery screech like raking a nail across a window pane. Oh, hello, Jones! That's Columbus Jones. His shroud cost $400, and his entire trousseau, including monument, $2,700. Now that was in the spring of '26. Dead people came all the way from the Alleghenies to see his things. Mm-hmm. Well, friend, goodbye. I must be going. Don't know where, except I won't sleep in that crazy old cemetery anymore. I'll travel till I find a respectable place. I'll hoof it all the way to New Jersey. Oh, there goes some of the Bledsoes. Well, if you'll just give me a lift with this tombstone, I'll join them. Mighty respectable old family, the Bledsoes. Well, at least they were 50 years ago when I walked these streets in daylight. Goodbye, friend. Well, with that old tombstone on his shoulder, he joined in that grisly procession. And I sat there for 2 hours watching him go clacking by. Sat there till the rooster crowed, and that weird procession vanished, not leaving a bone behind. And I woke up in my own bed. Nightmare. That's not as bad as I remember. I wonder about that other nightmare. Oh, no. Well, it was a story I used to hear when I was a boy. It always gave me nightmares. Well, it did. What? You want to hear it? But it gave me nightmares. Well, I was a boy, but... Well, I suppose a grown-up doesn't get scared like a child does. Well, I'll tell it to you if you want me to. Now, I first heard this story on my Uncle John's farm. I got sent there every summer. Oh, that was just a heavenly place for a boy. And some nights, all us children would gather around in the kitchen around the fire, and Uncle Daniel would tell us stories. He was one of the blacks on the farm, and he was... Well, yes, this was before the Civil War. And my Uncle John owned slaves. I'm ashamed to say that my family didn't try or know anything different. See, Daniel was a warm person. He had a good heart, and there wasn't a bit of guile in him. Now, I haven't seen him for 50 years, but I still carry him right here. I've written about him under his own name and his Jim, and carried him all sorts of places. I mean, to Hannibal and down the Mississippi on a raft. You know, it's on that farm that I got my great liking for that race and its fine qualities. You know, black face is as welcome to me now as it was then. It was a privilege to be sitting there by that fire. See, Daniel taught me how to tell stories. And the one story he always ended up the night with was this one. Now, once upon a time, there was a monstrous, mean man who lived way out on the prairie, all alone by himself. Well, except he had a wife. And by, his wife died. And he took her way out there on the prairie and buried her. Well, She had a golden arm. All gold from her shoulder down. He was powerful, powerful. And that night, he couldn't get to sleep at all, 'cause he wanted that golden arm. When it come midnight, he couldn't stand it no more. So he gets up, he does, and he takes a lantern and just shoves out into the storm. And he digs her up and gets that golden arm. Then he bows down his head against the wind, and it plows, and it plows, and it plows through that snow. And then all of a sudden he stopped. He said, "My land, what's that?" And he listened, and he listened, and he hears the wind say, and then from way back yonder where that grave is, he hears a voice all mixed up with that wind that he can't hardly tell them apart. Who got my golden arm? Who got my golden arm? Oh, he's just a shivering and a shaking, and he's saying, "Oh my land." Then the wind blows the lantern out, and the snow and the sleet blow at him, almost choking him, and he starts towards home, knee-deep through the snow, almost dead, and he's scared. And pretty soon, he hears that voice again, and it was coming closer. Who got my golden arm? When he gets to the pasture, he hears that voice again, and it's closer now, and it's out there in the dark, in the storm, and he hears, "Who got my golden arm?" When he gets to the house, he rush upstairs, and he jump in bed and throw the covers over himself, and covering his ears and his head. And then he hears, "Pat, pat, pat." It's coming upstairs. Then he hears the latch, and he knows it's in the room. And he knows it's standing by the bed. And he can't scarcely breathe. And he feels it bending over him. And he knows something cold is almost against his head. And then he hears a whisper in his ear. Who got my golden arm? You got it! Happy Halloween.